I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Alec Murdaugh double murder trial, the brutal shooting of his wife and his son. Now he's appealing, and we're taking a look at all the big issues in question. Could Murdaugh get a new trial? Here's the story. On June 7th, 2021, the sun set at 8:29 in the low country of South Carolina. That night, Paul Murdaugh and his mother Maggie were by the dog kennels on the family's sprawling 1,700 acres on Moselle Road in Colleton County. Paul's father, Alec, was also home that night, but he said he did not stay there. Sometime shortly after 9 p.m., Alec took a ride to his parents' house about 18 minutes away to visit his mother, who suffers from dementia. After Alec returned from his mother's house, he called 911. Paul and Maggie were both dead, shot to death with 2 different weapons. When police responded, they interviewed Alec and began an investigation that would absolutely stun folks in the low country of South Carolina and transform this case into the biggest trial in the history of the state. Alec Murdaugh was convicted of double murder, but still claims his innocence, and now has filed his appeal seeking to overturn his conviction and get a new trial. That's what the rest of his life is all about. Alec Murdaugh will never admit to the double murder. It's just not going to happen. He has claimed his innocence and is still proclaiming his innocence and wants to get that new trial, filing his appeal. The financial crimes, he admitted all that stuff. Absolutely admitted it. But the double murder, his own family, annihilating them, never, never. Now fighting for that new trial, trying to get this conviction or convictions overturned. I want to take a look at one of the appellate issues in this case. And it's a pretty important one, and it's one that's been litigated to a certain extent already, jury tampering. You remember all the jury drama after the trial connected to Becky Hill, the court clerk. And that brings us to our first question in our investigation. Was there jury tampering in Alec Murdaugh's trial? That's a big deal. Now, obviously, the appellate court will take a look at this, will examine what's on the record and try to figure that out. The lower court said no, there was not jury tampering. Let's get to the bottom of this, though. We've got some great insiders. Joining me, co-author of Clerk of Court, Becky Hill's book, Behind the Doors of Justice, the Murdaugh Murders, and author of Trial Watchers. I have a copy in my hand right here tonight. Neil Gordon is with us. Fascinating for all you true crime fans. And joining us by phone, Juror 864, author of the new book, The Long Road to Justice, Unraveling Alec Murdaugh's Tangled Web. Amy Williams is with us. Great to have you both here. Let me begin this. Let's first hear from Becky Hill, her side of this, because we know what the defense is saying. Let's listen.
Did your comments, or were your comments in any way phrased in favor of one side or against another side, or were they more of a neutral comment about paying attention?
No, it was not for one side or the other.
During the course of the deliberations, once the jury went back there, did you have any contact with the juries or have any substantive discussion with them?
Not at all.
Before Mr. Murdaugh testified, did you tell the jury not to be fooled by the evidence presented by Mr. Murdaugh's lawyers?
Mr. Harpootlian, I never talked to the jurors about any of the evidence.
Okay, the
in
answer
this
would
case.
be yes or no, then you can explain. Did you say that?
No.
Okay. Did you ever instruct the jury to watch him closely immediately before he testified, looking at his actions, looking at his movements? Did you ever tell a jury to do that?
No.
Did you ever tell the jury to pay attention to Mr. Murdaugh's testimony?
To pay attention, not specifically to his testimony. I did tell the jury to pay attention.
To what?
Just generally in the hallway when I was speaking.
Not to him?
No.
Just any witness?
Right.
All right, I want to begin by going to juror 864, Amy, who's on the phone tonight. Was there anything other than the evidence that influenced your verdict in this case?
Oh, no, nothing but the evidence and witness testimony.
Was there any communication other than, okay, get your lunch, you know, come in at this time, come out at that time from Becky Hill?
No, there wasn't anything else except whatever was needed from her or whatever instructions she was may have been given to give us.
Neil Gordon, you wrote the book with her. What was going through your mind as all of this is now coming out? All of these allegations against Becky Hill?
Well, realizing that sometimes you don't know somebody until you allow enough time to go by, perhaps. I was really shocked by a lot of these allegations. And of course, nothing has been proven to be true, but you have to judge people on their body of work. And some things have been pretty concerning as it relates to me, and of course, an inordinate amount of charges and criminal investigation underway. So very concerning.
So from your perspective, did you have any conversations with her about this issue? Did it come up?
No, I was, at the evidentiary hearing, and after this sort of first came out, there was a press conference, as you know, Vinnie, on September the 5th. I did ask her, of course, because I was curious, is what they're saying, is this true? And the only thing that she mentioned is that she did have some conversations, and she mentioned this in the evidentiary hearing, with one of the jurors. It had to do with a very confusing Facebook post and whether or not this juror was speaking to people about the case when she was outside of the Colleton County Courthouse. And so that's all that she mentioned to me, that she did have conversations. There was discussions about this juror's ex-husband and restraining orders and things of that regard. But I didn't get the impression, at least from her, that she had had any of these types of conversations that could impact the jury.
I want to take a listen, because there was a hearing on all this, and take a listen to Juror P and Juror Z.
Did you hear Becky Hill, Clerk of Court for Clarendon County, make any comment about this case before your verdict?
I did, yes, ma'am.
What did she say?
It was the day that Mr. Murdaugh was taking the stand.
Yes, sir.
And she made a comment about watch his body language.
About watch his
body language.
His body language, I see.
Yes, ma'am.
And what else?
That's all I can recall.
All right, sir. Was your verdict on March the 2nd, 2023 influenced in any way with any communications by the Clerk of Court, Becky Hill, in this case?
No.
Did you hear Ms. Becky Hill make any comment about this case before your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
If yes, what did Ms. Hill say?
To watch his actions.
To watch his actions? What else?
To watch him closely.
Was your verdict influenced in any way by the communications of the Clerk of Court in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Juror 864, Amy Williams, your personal experience as a juror, when you got that notice and you went down to the courthouse, did you have any idea the magnitude that this trial would take on? And at what point did you realize that this was becoming the trial of this century?
No, I had no idea when I was summoned and I went down. But once I got there and I realized how many people were summoned. There was a lot of people. And also, as the trial progressed, you know, as we were being brought in, I could see the line getting longer and longer every day for people to come in. And then at like during lunchtime, you can see the lawn is being covered even more with reporters and people standing in line waiting to get in, after lunch. So I started realizing that it was getting really big.
Let me ask you, Amy, I always describe this as the big trial in a small town. Did everyone in town know you were on the jury? And how difficult was it for you to not talk about this for so many weeks, week after week after week with anyone?
No, nobody knew in town, nobody knew that I was on the jury except for my parents and my son, and they didn't say anything to anyone, and so, but it was crazy walking around because when we left, we always left around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. So then I'm coming straight back to the house, and I don't go anywhere else except on the weekend if I'm going to the grocery store or something. And you could always hear people talking about it, but nobody knew that I was on the jury. But I was trying to get away from whatever conversations were being held about it.
It had to be so difficult. I just want to play this quickly. Rhonda McLevin, the Barnwell County Clerk of Court. And Neil, take a listen.
First of all, she said we might want to write a book because she needed a lake house and I needed to retire. And then further conversations, a guilty verdict would sell more books.
All right, it was a guilty verdict, Neil. Did you buy a lake house yourself? What'd you do with all those millions?
Oh, goodness gracious. No, not at all, Vinny. And it was fascinating listening to Rhonda. I think it was January of that evidentiary hearing, because in our book, Behind the Doors of Justice, Becky talked about them as being Thelma and Louise, I believe. And after this came out, I did have an opportunity to speak with Becky about it. And she said that she disagreed with what was stated, there on the stand. But, very odd. She claimed Rhonda was a very, very close friend, one of her best friends. And it didn't appear that way to me during that evidentiary hearing.
All right, Neil Gordon, always great to see you. New book, Trial Watchers. It's great for folks like you who are watching trials with us, and also The Long Road to Justice, written by Amy Williams. But Amy's going to stay with us. Coming up next, was the money the motive?
I remember stealing from people, I remember lying to people, and I remember misleading people.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please.
And I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Melody Ferris convicted of murdering her husband. On Tuesday, her attorney joins us live to talk about what's next for his embattled client.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
I'm asking you to tell me about just one conversation, one time where you recall looking somebody in the eye and convincing them with your lies that nothing was amiss. One conversation.
There were plenty of conversations where I looked people in the eye and I lied to them. There were plenty of times where I took money that I shouldn't have taken. There were plenty of times where I stole money.
So the trial of Alec Murdaugh was a trial about a double murder of his wife and his son. Yet the jury heard so much evidence about his financial crimes. The defense didn't want him to hear all that, but they did, and he got up on the stand and he admitted to all of it. And prosecutors were saying, listen, the reason this evidence is important is because it shows his life unraveling and all of his financial crimes, and the money was going to be exposed, and this murder creates a diversion where all of a sudden people aren't worried about the money anymore and the financial crimes. Now all of a sudden Alec Murdaugh is a victim because he's lost his wife and his son. He's trying to buy time to divert their attention. So as a result, the jury heard all of it. So now Alec Murdaugh is appealing, and another one of his appellate issues is the financial crimes presented as evidence of motive. Does not believe that was right, believe it was used as character evidence and destroyed his character in front of this jury. And that brings us to our next question in our investigation, which is, was the money the motive? Was it all the financial crimes the motive for the murder, to divert everyone's attention away from the money? Still with me, co-author of Clerk of Court Becky Hill's book, Behind Closed Doors of Justice, The Murdaugh Murders, and author of Trial Watchers, Neil Gordon. Thanks for sticking around, Neil. Appreciate it. And also joining us by phone, Juror 864, author of the new book, The Long Road to Justice, Unraveling Alec Murdaugh's Tangled Web, Amy Williams. Amy, let me ask you, from your perspective, as you listened to the evidence in this case, why did you think Alec Murdaugh committed this brutal double murder?
Well, I think it was a perfect storm of a lot of things happening. Sure, the financial crimes, you know, all of that probably had a part of it, was a part of it. I don't believe it was the full and only motive. There had to be a whole lot of other things going on because this murder was brutal, it was personal, and I feel like there's way more to it than that, than just trying to get sympathy, you know, because everything was falling apart. There was more happening.
What did you think of his character?
Well, I mean, his character, his character was not that great, but his character is not what causes or really defines whether he actually killed his wife or son. I mean, the evidence proved that he did that, him being placed at the scene and him not being able, lying about it and then finally admitting it and then not being able to fit the timeline. So his character was not very good at all, but that was not motive enough or reason enough to say that he committed these murders.
Neil, from your perspective in this case, all this evidence, this tale that just is jaw-droppingly shocking, why do you think Alec Murdaugh did it?
I agree with Amy completely. I can't imagine the pressure of having the legacy of the Murdaugh family, millions and millions of dollars. Then your son is accused of being the one behind the wheel of killing a young lady who had decades of life in front of her. The father was 2 days away from passing away. I can only speak for myself and friends that I know. You know, when you're under money pressure, sometimes you're not in your right mind. Now, of course, all of us would not, of course, no one that I associate with would ever do that. But I do believe that the combination of factors, just as Amy had mentioned, certainly played a role in why he murdered the two members of his family.
Amy, do you think drugs played a role in anything here?
I don't believe it played too big of a role. I'm sure that he was probably taking some drugs, but not to the extent that they were trying to make us think that he was, because he wouldn't be alive if he did, but maybe it played a small part.
And how about his demeanor? Like, we're looking at one of the interviews that was done inside the detective's vehicle. What did you think of his demeanor that night that we saw in the video when police first responded and were questioning him?
I thought that things were really strange, and I thought it was really strange that he was able to just give them a suspects and a motive, and he even did that from the 911 call. I mean, which was not really important at that time because you're trying to get help and they're trying to get you help. I thought that all of that was very strange, and the way he was acting and the questions he was asking, some of them were, it was just crazy to me.
And did you have a theory on where the murder weapons ended up?
No, that one I just couldn't pinpoint that.
Neil, as people look back on this case, and obviously the appeal is happening, do you think there's anyone that feels sorry for Alec Murdaugh?
Wow, I haven't heard that question before. There's so many people I come in contact with that we put in our book, Trial Watchers, who feel a lot of empathy for the family members of Alex Murdaugh. Of course, his brothers and sister, and of course, Buster Murdaugh. But I've not heard anyone to have a lot of sympathy for Alex. You have to remember, and the psychologist talked about this in our book, we tend to like to put people up on a pedestal. You know, this is a family that's been around for decades, and they've done so much good in the Low Country. But just as much as we want to put them on the pedestal, it's almost like Dallas and Dynasty from back in our day, Vinny.
Oh, yeah.
We like to see them get knocked off, so knocked off the pedestal. So that's what I think. I think people...
Yep. We're out of time, Neil. I got to cut you off. I'm so sorry. Neil Gordon, Amy Williams, great books. Thank you so much. Up next, were Murdaugh's guns used for the murders?
No credit hit.
I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Alec Murdaugh double murder conviction. He's locked up for life, but trying desperately for a new trial and has filed his appeal. Here's the story. Alec Murdaugh has been convicted of the unthinkable, the brutal murders of his wife and son. But what makes this even more shocking is who Alec Murdaugh is and the history of his family in the Low Country of South Carolina. His family's prominence in the legal community began more than 100 years ago with his great-grandfather, who served as solicitor, and continued with each generation which followed. Alec likewise was a successful lawyer. He enjoyed immense power, privilege, and influence until his world began to unravel. Drug addiction, allegations of stealing from his law firm and clients, and now a double murder conviction. It was the trial America watched on Court TV, and now Murdaugh has filed his appeal, attempting to get his convictions overturned and get a brand new trial. It's always an uphill battle for a criminal defendant trying to get a new trial, but we've seen it happen in some of the high-profile cases here on Court TV. So it's within the realm of possibilities. I want to take a look at, excuse me, another appellate issue in all of this, and it involves the failure to recover the murder weapons in this case. Remember, they were never found. 2 victims, 2 different guns, but never, ever recovered. But prosecutors argued that they belonged to Alec Murdaugh. They were the guns from the home. Now, that brings us to the next question of our investigation, which is, were Murdaugh's guns used for the murders? Was that proven? Is there any doubt there? Is it any reason in any way connected to a reason to overturn a conviction? Joining me, an attorney representing multiple victims in the case who has a new book, Anything But Bland, Moxie Murdaugh and Making Life Happen on Your Own Terms. Eric Bland is with us, and criminal defense attorney, lawyer Lori on TikTok, Lori Murray. Great to have you both here. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Let's play just a little bit of Paul Greer, the SLED firearms examiner, testifying about this issue.
Based on my examination, it was determined that items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, and 39 had matching mechanism marks, and it was concluded that those items had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
So if I understand it correctly, the items collected right by Maggie had been loaded into, extracted to, and ejected by the same firearm that were identified, that items were picked up by the side of the house.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, Eric, I'll begin with you. Were Murdaugh's guns used for the murders?
Yes, and the answer is pretty simple. One is that if there were executioners coming, hitmen coming to take out Alex or his family, they would have brought their own guns. No sane hitman that's coming to kill a family would come into the low country in a rural area. They're going to break into a house and take somebody's guns and kill them. They would come with their own guns. So the answer is it was his guns, because there were matching bullets, casings outside the back door that came from the same 300 blackout that was used to kill Maggie. So I believe that, it's a circumstantial evidence case. We've often convicted people without weapons being found. We've often had, very seldom, but there is murders that have been convicted even without a body. But in this case, there was a significant amount of circumstantial evidence that would show that the blackout gun, one, was lost and replaced, and those bullets matched the bullet casings that were outside the back door.
Lori Murray, this was an interesting case of ballistics. A lot of times there's a weapon and they match the ballistics to the weapon. Here they were just matching the ammo to each other, the shell casings to each other, and circumstantially connecting them to Murdaugh's guns. What are your thoughts? Did they prove that?
I mean, let's be honest, it's very strong evidence that they were the same weapons used. The casings matched, the ballistic markings on the casings matched. It's very strong evidence. I think the appeal issue for them is that the expert witness never testified that it could only be from one gun, that only one gun, that these were specific to firing one specific blackout 300, that the expert didn't testify that another gun could not have made those same markings. And honestly, what is that? That's an argument for your closing argument. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's the grounds for appeal. I think we're all pretty certain that those were the guns that were used in the crime.
Okay, let's work to another issue here involving the gunshot residue that was apparently found on a blue raincoat taken from Murdaugh's mother's house. Here's Megan Fletcher, again, an SLED SLED agent.
There were 13 particle lifts collected from the exterior of the jacket, and I did find particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue on it.
Now, what does that mean?
That jacket could have been in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, or something that had gunshot residue on it could have transferred to that object.
So, Lori Murray, how compelling evidence is this for you? The gunshot residue found on a blue raincoat taken from Murdaugh's mother's house.
This is actually one that I might have a little bit of problem with, because the caretaker was very adamant that he was carrying a blue tarp. She was asked specifically if it was a raincoat. Could it have been a raincoat? No, it was a tarp. And this is a hunting family. They had guns. They were shooting nonstop. This was what they were about. So there's any number of reasons that gunshot residue could have been on that rain jacket. That is not what she said was in Alec Murdaugh's arms when he walked into the house. So I don't think this piece of evidence should have come in. Is it something that's going to overturn the case and get them a new trial? Doubtful, but I don't think it should have come in.
I want to take a listen to that testimony from Shelley Smith, the caretaker, Eric, and she's very specific in what she saw Alec Murdaugh carrying that night.
Did he have anything, or was he holding anything?
He had a blue something in his hand.
Say that one more time.
A blue something in his hand, something blue.
A blue something in his hand. Mm-hmm. And can you show me how he was holding it?
Like this.
Is it all right if I touch it?
Yeah, this one.
How was he doing it?
Like this, like that.
Holding something like this?
Yes.
And what did it look like?
Like a blue tart, like a tart.
Blue?
Blue.
Okay. Was it vinyl?
It's like a tart that you put on a car, you keep your car covered up.
Eric, this part of the case just confused me. The raincoat versus the tarp and the gunshot residue. What was your takeaway here? Do you think he was wearing a raincoat, or do you think he was carrying a tarp?
It's hard to tell. I totally agree with Lori on this. I just don't think it was a compelling part of the case. I think the compelling part of the case was what Lori talked about before, that it's obvious it came from the same gun. The videos of him at the kennel, the Snapchat video was so powerful. And then his own weird behavior after 10 o'clock when the police came and what he did. I just think that was very confusing with Miss Shelley, and maybe she got confused with a raincoat, but I would venture to say most houses have a blue raincoat. I have blue raincoats in my house, and they're shooting families. So maybe that was the father's raincoat, and he shoots all the time. I mean, pretty much everybody in that family was shooting guns, and that wasn't a on that code. So I never thought that was the most powerful piece of evidence, but I totally agree with Laurie. These are not issues that our Court of Appeals, Supreme Court will ever use. This was going to be on letting in the financial evidence if it was too prejudicial, and maybe the juror issue. That's his only real.
And these are more of those reasonable doubt type arguments that you can make, and maybe you convince a jury, maybe you don't convince a jury. Lori, quickly, where do you think the murder weapons ended up?
The bottom of the ocean. I think he had to have some help getting rid of those guns. If he indeed was the one who had them, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It was a short drive. He went straight to his mom's and straight back. So if they were anywhere, they were stashed at his mom's and then somehow were moved from that location. And this, again, is part of the problem that law enforcement did not do a thorough investigation. They did not search like they should have. They did not look through the house. They did not look through his mom's house. They looked on the side of the road a little bit to find Maggie's phone when they were led there, but they didn't do a search like they should have. These weapons might have been found if they had.
All right, our guests are staying with us. Still to come, did Alec throw Maggie's phone into the woods?
Yes, sir. Performed many tests over the weekend. I put pick it up and shake it, pick it up and throw it. I threw it off to my desk. I knocked it off of my desk. I tried to flip it end over end. I tried to throw it like a Frisbee.
How are we doing, guys? We're good? Okay.
You're on very shaky ground.
That is unreal.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
I did not do it to hurt anybody.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please. This was a real-life soap opera. And I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Another mystery from 4147 Moselle Road that night is what happened to Maggie's phone? How did it end up where it ended up? Now, prosecutors have a theory that it was Alec Murdaugh that threw it out of his car as he was leaving the property. So let's go back. Let's retrace his steps. So he came out of this gate, came down here to Moselle, then made a right, and about a quarter mile down the road, that's where he tossed it. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to get in the car and show you the spot where that phone was thrown. All right, I'm heading out of the gate, making that right down Moselle Road. And I'm trying to get up to 42 miles an hour. That's about the speed that he was going. So I'm going a little quick here. I'm watching on my GPS where the spot is, where the phone was thrown. Again, we're going down. I'm now at 38, 39, 40, 41, 42 miles per hour. Still not there. I'm heading down the road. I've got to go around a small bend here. We're getting close to the spot, super close to the spot. I'm going to put my hand out the window as soon as we hit the area. The prosecutors say this phone was thrown. We're super close. We're closing in, and this is it, right here, right here, right here. That's where the phone was thrown. Somewhere in this wooded area is where the phone was found. And then when you look here, what's really standing out to me is how narrow the road is. Because you're thinking about trying to toss something while driving down the road, and you got to get it across the road. But this road is 1, 2, 3, 4 steps until the spot where he'd be driving and throwing that phone into the wooded area. So it's really not that far. You could get it, I don't know, a good distance into the woods here just by driving down this very narrow road. So that's another thing when the jury comes to this view. Will they notice these things? And now, as he's filed his appeal, this is an issue related to the tossing of the phone. An appellate issue, the expert testifying to cell phone data after tossing his phone around his office. So what is that all about? Well, the car data puts Alec Murdaugh's vehicle at a certain spot, right? At a certain miles per hour. And the question is, did he toss the phone? What happens when a phone moves? And there's an argument about whether or not the phone would necessarily light up, and then that data would be recorded. Well, her phone did not light up at that moment. So could you throw the phone without having the phone light up? Well, take a listen to the forensic cell phone expert who did this experiment in his office.
I obtained an iPhone 11 Pro Max, which is the same make and model as the phone that Maggie had.
All right, and what software version was on your test device?
The software that was on my device is iOS 14.8. The one that was on Maggie's was iOS 14.6. So the iOS that was on my device that I tested was slightly newer. Yes, sir. Performed many tests over the weekend. I put pick it up and shake it, pick it up and throw it. I threw it off to my desk. I knocked it off of my desk. I tried to flip it end over end. I tried to throw it like a Frisbee. I did each one at least 10 to 20 times. If the phone is thrown, the screen does not always turn on. In my experimentation, I determined that when the phone is thrown more like a Frisbee, 9 out of 10 times, the screen does not turn on. The times that it did turn on most often was when I pick it up and tried to shake it, then the screen would come on briefly.
So you did these experiments this last weekend?
Correct.
You did not record any data?
I did not.
You just played with the phone and are coming here to express your observations?
That's correct.
All right, this was a big part of the case, so that brings us to our next question in our investigation, which is, did Alec throw Maggie's phone into the woods? Let's bring back in our guest, still with us, Eric Bland and criminal defense attorney Lori Murray. Okay, this issue was like wild, and the experiment, I guess he's throwing the phone like a Frisbee, and then it's not lighting up, but mine just lit up, but I didn't let it go. Lori, what do you think of this issue, and what do you think of whether or not Alec Murdaugh threw that phone?
Well, he was very close to the phone, but he was not in the area. He was not right there when the phone last went on. So that's the problem. He was in his driveway at the last time the phone went on. And this officer or investigator doing some tests in his office is completely insufficient. It never should have been allowed in. It was not recorded. We have no evidence he actually did these tests. He didn't write down his results. I mean, we don't allow lie detector tests in because they're not scientific enough. This is hoodoo. This is hoodoo. It never should have been allowed in. And this was a big issue, a huge issue in the case. It might finagle itself into the reasons he should get a new trial.
Eric Bland, your thoughts about the phone tossing, the experiment, and whether or not it was Alec Murdaugh who threw Maggie's phone?
With Laurie, that the experiment was not really relevant and to where the phone was found. However, I do believe that Alex Murdaugh threw the phone. You were driving a Charger. He was driving a Suburban, which is higher up with a larger window. He's a strong man. He's a former athlete. There's no question, I believe, that he tossed the phone on his way out to his parents' house. I don't think this is a reversible issue on appeal. There's other issues that the appellate court can point to that the jury used to convict him. It wasn't a real great moment for Judge Newman to let that testimony in, but it's not enough to reverse the case. And just to address one issue, I've been to Mizell. It's 2,800 acres, Vinnie, 1,400 of it, which is swampland. And I've been through every trail on a gator on that property. And I believe that one of the guns or both of the guns could be somewhere in those swamps. There's no way that SLED and the FBI could have traversed every single area of those swamps. And he knows that like the back of his hand.
Yeah. Lori, is there any other way the phone gets there? Like, there was no evidence that anyone else was there that night. I mean, that was another big problem in this case. You point the finger at someone, but you need a little bit of evidence that someone was there.
Isn't that the evidence that someone else was there? I mean, it might be little tiny pieces of a big puzzle, and it might be just a minute piece of evidence, but it still is a potential piece of evidence that somebody else was there. And I don't mean that this alone can, give him a new trial, but this is one of the pieces that goes all together to form the basis of him getting a new trial. I think justice will not be served unless he does get a new trial, which is unfortunate for everybody involved. But there were a lot of mistakes. This was a minor one, but it also, it plays into and it adds in to the reasons why he should get a new trial.
Eric, as we pull back here for a moment and look at the whole thing, like everything that happened that night, do you think this was a man who was out of his mind, or was this a man who had a plan? To me, that's still the big lingering question here.
He wasn't out of his mind. This is a man who had a plan. I think he was very upset at Paul that he ruined the type of lifestyle that he had and the ability to steal from clients. I think the financial pressures were overwhelming on him with Maggie, with my client, Tony Satterfield, as a result of the settlement in the Gloria Satterfield case. I think drugs made him think a little irrationally. I don't believe that the drugs were the cause that caused him to kill Maggie and Paul or steal money. I just think that it made him act irrationally. Some of his drug use may have contributed to that. But this is a man that had a plan, and he knew that Paul's accident with Mallory Beach was going to land Paul in jail for a long time. But it put the focus on the family. It put the focus on his finances, and he broke. The man just broke.
Lori Murray, 0 to 10. Give me a number. Your thoughts of the possibility of Alec Murdaugh getting a new trial. 10 being it's a lock, 0, no chance. We have about 15 seconds.
Say it's probably a solid 6. I don't think I think he should, but I'd say a solid 6 as to whether the Supreme Court will actually give him one.
All right. Eric Bland has the brand new book out, Lori Murray. You can check her out on TikTok, Lawyer Lori. Great to catch up with you. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again very, very soon. It was a fall from grace like we have never seen before. A man whose family literally ran the justice system in the low country of South Carolina, locked up for life as a double murderer and family annihilator. And that's his main problem. The nature of his crimes and the nature of his character will make it even more difficult for any judge or justice to rule in his favor. Judges are humans too, and they don't want their signature on anything helping a man like Alec Murdaugh unless they have no choice. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.